Every year there's this incredible spectacle that happens right above our heads. Migratory birds crossing entire continents. It's a rhythm that feels as old as time, right? But lately, something's different. That epic journey seems quieter. The formations in the sky, they feel smaller.
So why are our skies getting emptier? It's a question a lot of us have probably wondered about. What's going on up there? Is it our expanding cities, the disappearing meadows, or is it something else we haven't even thought of? Well, one man decided he couldn't just stand by and watch. He knew he had to do something. And that man is Christian. This guy has spent over 20 years studying birds. I mean, he even learned to fly a microlight plane just so he could be up there with them, in the sky. And all that passion led him to this. Well, this bold and, let's be honest, kind of crazy project. Okay, so we're calling this a man's mad project for a reason. See, this wasn't just some academic study where you sit back and take notes. No, Christian's plan was to get his hands dirty, to actually intervene. He wanted to see the dangers of our modern world from a bird's eye view and then find them a new, safer way to go. So what was this idea? He called it a school of migration. And the concept is, well, it's pretty incredible. He was going to raise a flock of geese from the moment they hatched and then personally lead them on their very first migration. How? By using his microlight plane as their guide. He wasn't just a pilot. He was going to be their teacher, their guide, and basically their parent.
Right, so how on earth do you get a flock of wild geese to follow a noisy flying machine across an entire continent? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Well, it turns out the whole thing starts before they're even out of the egg. It's all about this really delicate process of becoming a parent.
It all comes down to this amazing biological thing called imprinting. Basically, geese bond with the very first thing they see and hear when they're born. So Christian had to become that first thing. He literally stayed with the eggs day and night, just talking to them. So when they finally hatched, his was the first face they saw, his voice was the first sound they knew. And from there, he taught them everything: how to waddle, how to flap, and eventually how to fly, right there alongside the wing of his plane. And here they are. This is the family. 8 gray geese, all born right in his home incubator. And what's fascinating is they immediately formed 2 little family groups. You had the yellow beaks, 5 of them from a Scandinavian line. They were the dominant ones, a bit more cautious. And then you had the pink beaks, 3 sisters from a Siberian family, and they were the total opposite, super adventurous and curious about everything. And as you'll see, these different personalities are going to play a huge role in the journey ahead. So their journey from Alsace all the way to the Atlantic coast. This wasn't just about flying a long way. Think of it as a crash course in survival for the 21st century. Christian had to teach his flock how to deal with a world that their natural instincts just weren't built for. Okay, lesson number 1, food. This was the first huge hurdle. You see, the natural, lush meadows that geese have relied on for centuries, they're disappearing fast. Instead, you've just got these massive stretches of farmland. And for a hungry flock trying to fly thousands of miles, that's a really, really big problem. So what did Christian do? He taught them how to adapt. His first big lesson was, hey, let's use what humans have left behind. He guided them down into these huge harvested cornfields. And what did they find? A total feast of leftover seeds, leaves, corn. For a flock of migrating birds, this was an absolute godsend. All right, next problem. A wild goose's instinct screams at it to avoid weird, unnatural places. So imagine you're a goose, and you see a gravel pit with this strange, bright turquoise water. That's a huge red flag, right? But that natural fear can actually stop them from finding safe spots to just rest and regroup. So Christian's next lesson was all about trust. He actually landed his plane in that weird-looking gravel pit. He was showing them, look, it's okay, it's safe. He taught them to fight that instinct and see these industrial sites as what they could be, safe havens. Little man-made oases free from predators, where they could just land, rest, and get a drink. But the modern world has obstacles that evolution just never could have prepared these birds for. And maybe the most intimidating of all are those giant wind farms that seem to pop up overnight, like these huge, spinning forests of steel. Now, Christian's method for dealing with this was, well, it was completely counterintuitive. Instead of flying around the turbines, he flew his flock right towards them. His thinking was he had to tame their fear. He had to teach them how to navigate through these things because he knew in the future, avoiding them just wasn't going to be an option. So they were learning all these new rules for a modern world. But on top of that, they still had to face the dangers that have always been part of migration. And this part of the journey, this is where their training, and more importantly, their family bonds, were about to be put to the ultimate test.
One evening, they flew straight into some really nasty turbulence. The air just turned into this violent, invisible sea, tossing the young geese and Christian's little plane all over the place. The flock just broke apart. They were scattered, losing that tight V formation. And in that kind of chaos, it only takes a split second to lose one.
You can just imagine Christian up there, frantically counting them in his head. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. That's it. Only 7. One of them was gone. And in the middle of that storm, his absolute worst fear was coming true. A goose on its own has almost zero chance of surviving.
But then, a moment of pure relief. The 8th goose reappeared, fighting its way back to the family. And you know what? That storm forced them to learn a critical lesson. They learned how to feel every little shift in the wind with their wingtips, how to bend with the currents. They learned to surf that violent air, not as 8 separate birds, but as one single unified flock.
The dangers out there weren't just from Mother Nature, though. One day, they saw what looked like a perfect, peaceful spot on a river, just filled with ducks. But it wasn't peaceful. It was a hunter's trap. There were live ducks tied by their feet, used as bait to lure other birds in. They just barely escaped from a hidden hunter. And in that moment, they learned a really harsh lesson about the most dangerous predator they'd ever face.
And that terrifying encounter, it points to a really devastating reality. So you've got about 50,000 gray geese making this migration every year. And out of that number, hunting takes out an estimated 17,000 of them. Just think about that. That's more than a third of the entire population gone every single year.
At last, after weeks of flying, learning, surviving, they caught a new smell on the wind. Salt. They'd made it. The endless blue of the Atlantic Ocean stretched out before them. But right here, at the finish line, was the final, and honestly, the most difficult lesson of all.
He led them to a huge nature reserve, a place where they'd be safe from hunters. And this is where he had to do the hardest thing yet. Let them go. He'd been their parent, their teacher, their protector. But now, for them to truly be wild geese, he had to become a stranger. He had to leave so they could be free.
And really, this was the whole point from the very beginning. Christian's hope was never just about saving these 8 birds. His real hope was that his school of migration had given them what they needed to join other wild flocks, to learn from them. And this is the crucial part, to one day pass on all the amazing lessons they had learned together.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? Christian showed them a whole new path, a new way to survive in our modern world. He gave them the tools. But the real test of this whole incredible experiment, that'll come when this flock has children of their own. Will they remember what he taught them? And will they teach it to the next generation?